This week on The Hunt, what if the man next door wasn't who he claimed to be? Normal neighborhood, a quiet home. Until the day police uncovered one of the most chilling murder sprees in upstate New York history. It was a Tuesday morning when emergency services got the call. A neighbor noticed a woman lying motionless in the front yard of a house on Asteria Drive in Niagara. She was soon identified as 26-year-old Brianna, a recent college grad and a dedicated teacher. But she wasn't supposed to be there. Whatever had happened to her, it was bad, like really bad. As the investigation deepened, authorities learned that Brian lived with her boyfriend, 32-year-old Joseph. He was a chef at a popular local restaurant. Now, it might seem odd to focus on such mundane details, but they're actually quite important. You see, this isn't your typical murder mystery. This is a tale of obsession, betrayal, and ultimately bloodshed. And understanding the seemingly insignificant details helps us understand the big picture. For now, though, Brian's body was the only clue. They had no suspects, no clear motive. It was like a nightmare straight out of a crime drama. But then came the shocking discovery inside the home. Then as police searched the property, they found Joseph's body in the basement. Both victims had suffered brutal injuries, although the exact details have been kept under wraps. What we do know is that it was a violent attack. Now, let us take a step back to January 2024. That's when Brian and Joseph were reported missing after failing to show up for work. Friends and family grew increasingly worried. Days turned into weeks. Hope began to fade. But here's the thing, nothing in this story is what it seems. Back to the present. With two bodies and no obvious connection, the case seemed dead in the water. Detectives scoured through evidence, hoping for a breakthrough. Then they learned about the only person who could help them, Francisco Soriano. You might be thinking, who's Francisco Soriano? Well, he was a former tenant who had recently moved out of the house on Asteria Drive. But he wasn't just any tenant. He was a shadow in Brian and Joseph's lives. A man who knew them well, perhaps too well. But why would a former tenant be involved in such a horrific crime? To answer that question, we need to go back to the beginning. In early 2023, police responded to a domestic incident at the same house on Asteria Drive. Allegedly, a man had attacked his girlfriend. And guess who that man was? You guessed it, Luis. And who was his girlfriend? None other than Brian herself. So right off the bat, this case takes a dramatic turn. We're not dealing with strangers here. This was a crime of passion, betrayal, revenge. It was personal. During the investigation, Brian accused Luis of assaulting her. In response, he was arrested and charged. But here's where the story gets messy. Brian initially stood by her statement. Later, she seemed to change her tune. When she failed to appear in court, the charges against Luis were eventually dropped. However, she didn't escape unscathed. She was served with an order of protection. Why did Brian suddenly backtrack? Did she feel pressured? Was she protecting Luis? Was there something more sinister at play? Authorities wanted answers. As they dug deeper into Luis's background, they found a trail of inconsistencies. He seemed to have a habit of reinventing himself, even going so far as to alter his fingerprints. This wasn't your average Joe. This was someone with secrets, someone capable of unimaginable acts. But here's where the plot thickens. As the weeks passed without any arrests, the media began to lose interest. After all, it's not every day that a quiet suburban neighborhood is rocked by a double murder. But for the families of Brian and Joseph, the pain was just beginning. They demanded justice, but with few leads it seemed like a distant hope. However, behind the scenes, investigators were closing in. They discovered a crucial piece of evidence, a security camera clip from a nearby house. It wasn't much, just a fleeting glimpse of a man running from the crime scene. But they had something else. A witness who placed Luis near the crime scene around the time of the murders. All signs pointed to him. The only question was, where was he? As the manhunt intensified, the community was on edge. This wasn't just a random crime. It hit close to home. Neighbors were afraid, confused, desperate for answers. Meanwhile, Luis seemed to have vanished into thin air. Cell phone pings, financial transactions, social media activity, all seemed to have abruptly stopped. It was as if he disappeared off the face of the earth. He had, however, left behind a few breadcrumbs. An abandoned car a few miles away, a cryptic note in his apartment, But these clues were like chasing shadows. They offered glimpses but never a clear picture. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted on law enforcement. Not only did they have a killer on the loose, but public trust was at stake. Every lead had to be followed, every stone unturned. Then came the breakthrough. A routine search of public records revealed a crucial detail. Luis had once frequented a small motel nestled in the heart of rural Pennsylvania. The Liberty Motel was an unassuming place, a haven for weary travelers and those looking for a place to hide. For the authorities, it was a promising lead. Could this be where Luis was hiding? With a warrant in hand, they descended upon the motel. Every room was searched, every inch scrutinized. Then, in one of the rooms, they found him. Luis Francisco Soriano, wanted for questioning in connection with the double murder. The arrest was made, the manhunt ended. But the relief was short-lived. As the investigation continued, they uncovered a horrifying truth. Luis hadn't acted alone. He was part of a larger network, a web of deceit and danger. Court documents revealed chilling details about his associates, some with criminal records of their own. When questioned by the police, Luis remained tight-lipped. He invoked his right to silence. But his silence spoke volumes. It was a confession of sorts. His very demeanor screamed guilt. However, the police needed more than his silence. They needed concrete evidence to build a solid case. And what did they find? Photos of the victims, Brian and Joseph, lying lifelessly on the floor. These weren't just any pictures. They were souvenirs of a sick mind, trophies of a macabre collection. It was as if Luis had taken these photos to remember his heinous act. But that wasn't all. Police also found a map with several names and addresses circled. Was this a potential hit list? Were there more victims? The thought was chilling. But here's where the story takes another dark turn. After further investigation, authorities learned that many of the people on the list had testified against Luis in previous cases. Could this be a pattern of behavior? A history of violence and revenge? The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. In the end, they had enough. Evidence to charge Luis with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for each victim. It was a victory for justice, but the road ahead was long. The legal process would be lengthy and emotionally draining for all involved. However, there's a glimmer of hope. Prosecutors are seeking the maximum penalty for Luis. Hopefully, justice will be swift and severe. But here's the thing. This case isn't just about punishment. It's about understanding the darkness that can lurk in an ordinary man. Luis Francisco Soriano, a seemingly normal guy next door, turned cold-blooded killer. It raises profound questions about human nature, about the thin line between sanity and insanity. How does a person descend into such darkness? What drives him to commit unspeakable acts? These are questions that may never be fully answered. For now, we can only hope that justice prevails. As this case continues to unfold, one thing is clear. The quiet neighborhood of Ontario, New York, will never be the same. The memory of Brian and Joseph will forever be etched in the hearts of their loved ones and the community at large. Their tragic deaths serve as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. If you found this video powerful, please like, share, and subscribe. We cover true cases with verified sources, no drama, just facts. Stay safe, and always stay aware.